Thank you, Chairman Brooks and the members of the committee. I'm Brian Lee. I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada State Education Association. 2 years ago, SB 543 was developed behind closed doors and wasn't introduced until the 99th day of session. We had but one single hearing on the bill, passing minutes before sine die. Today, on the 100th day of this session, SB 439 is receiving a hearing, but with less fanfare. But it was also developed behind closed doors without even a preview of its content. The new funding formula will fail because it was never built to succeed. Ever since the introduction of SB 543 2 years ago, NSEA has expressed policy concerns at every opportunity: the lack of educator voice, no new revenue, watering down Zoom and Victory schools, freezing and squeezing school district budgets, giving away a giveaway to charter schools, and undoing the rules of collective bargaining. SB 439 fails to address a single issue raised by educators, showing its backers are unserious about developing and delivering a funding plan to benefit all Nevada students. Nevada ranks 45th among the states in education funding, yet the new funding plan includes no new funding. While the Funding Commission recommended a 10-year plan for Nevada to increase education funding by $2 billion per year, SB 439 completely ignores these recommendations. Meanwhile, SB 439 further moves Nevada backwards by proposing to strike language in the NRS that references merit salary increases and cost of living adjustments. If the legislature is intent in moving forward with the implementation of this new funding formula, NSEA recommends making 3 changes to ensure that the new plan does significantly less harm to Nevada students and educators. First, grandfather existing Zoom and Victory schools located in Nevada's poorest communities, serving the highest percentage of at-risk students and proven models of education equity. Second, hold districts truly harmless by using the greater of the 2020 total budget or per pupil amount by district, adjusted for inflationary costs of doing business. And finally, removing the anti-union language that increases district ending fund balances walled off from collective bargaining to 16.6% of annual operating costs. This will help preserve the collective bargaining process. Please listen to educators. Any trailing legislation that does not bring new revenue or address these serious policy concerns is doomed to fail Nevada's educators and its students.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association. 2 years ago, SB 543 was developed behind closed doors, wasn't introduced till the 99th day of the session, had but a single public hearing, and passed minutes before sine die. In my 30 years doing this work, SB 543 was one of the least transparent and least inclusive legislative efforts I've ever seen. But don't just take my word for it. When asked for their perspective on the process that produced SB 543, legislators in this building who actually voted for the bill had this to say, and I quote, "Unfortunately, the late introduction of SB 543 produced a process that legislators and stakeholders felt was not sufficiently transparent and inclusive." Quote, "I voted for it, although it had some language I thought would be problematic in its implementation." And I quote, "I would have liked to have seen greater discussion of the bill earlier in the session. It is a significant piece of legislation that impacts the entire state. We have been discussing changes to the funding formula for some time, so a more inclusive discussion of the bill would have been helpful." And I quote, "While I voted for SB 543, I had and still have some serious concerns about the methodology that underlies the budget formula. Regarding the legislative process, whenever possible, I believe that policy matters should be heard by policy committees before they are brought to money committees." And I quote, "I had hoped for a more robust and inclusive conversation about SB 543 prior to the last days of session, understanding that this is a complicated policy to take on." End quote. Nevada deserves a significantly more inclusive and transparent process on such a major policy shift, and we were promised our voices would be heard this session. Yet here we are with SB 439, developed behind closed doors, with no stakeholder input or even a preview of its content this time. Introduced, guess what, on the 99th day of the session, with its first hearing today, only a day later. So it should come as no surprise. The 3 simple fixes requested by educators are nowhere to be found in this bill. Easy. One, grandfather existing Zoom and Victory schools. They are our model programs of education equity. Stakeholders in our communities of color, in our BIPOC communities in Southern Nevada and in Northern Nevada are supportive of these programs, and you're dispensing with them. Two, hold districts truly harmless by using the greater of 2020 total budget or per pupil amount by district, adjusted by the inflationary costs of doing business. This is the freeze and squeeze, Chairman Brooks. Fix it. Three, remove anti-union ending fund balance language. This, quite possibly, is the most anti-union language compromising collective bargaining passed in any state since Scott Walker in Wisconsin. It's unconscionable, and people who claim to be supportive of workers and organized labor should be ashamed. Please, fix the bill. Thank you.
Good evening, Alexander Marks with the Nevada State Education Association. NSEA has participated in all 22 meetings of the Funding Commission. Chair McCormick even pointed out that NSEA has been nothing if not consistent about our opposition to Senate Bill 543. Unfortunately, despite our presence at all 22 meetings, active educators had no seat on that commission and were shut out of that process with none of the concerns being substantively addressed. For 2 years, educators have rallied outside of this very building, calling on our leaders to be brave and be bold. We began in 2019 under the banner Red for Ed, red symbolizing the financial hardships and struggles that our educators, as well as our public schools, face each day. We end 2021 under the banner of Red for Revenue because that is what is needed. We can build a bank, discuss how large that vault should be, but if it's empty, what did we really build? The approach that this state has taken has resulted in Nevada being 48th in the nation in education spending and 50th overall in chance of success index per the 2021 Quality Counts report. SB 543 and SB 439 will not change that issue. Unfortunately, despite the 4 rallies over the last 2 years, the testimony and every hearing with a microphone that's been turned on, the thousands of emails, including 300 just overnight before this hearing, engagement at all 22 funding commission meetings, SB 439 ignores the demands of teachers, education support professionals, other licensed professionals, parents, and community allies by failing to address a single issue raised in the last 2 years. NSEA has been urging you all to listen to educators for 100 days. We've asked for this bill to be fully funded. We've asked for an educator to be included on the commission. We've asked for Zoom and Victory schools to be grandfathered. We've asked for a true hold harmless to prevent a freeze and squeeze. We've asked to remove the anti-union end fund balance provision. In every single instance, nothing. Please know that our opposition comes from a good place, as we are trying to make this plan work for all Nevada students and educators whose stories, many heartbreaking, we hear every single day about what is happening in our schools, in our school sites, and in our classrooms. We need a plan that works for all of them. That is all we are asking today and for the last 2 years. And as it stands, Senate Bill 439 fails in that effort, but it is not too late to listen to educators. Thank you.